You know, there's a specific feeling you get when you settle in to watch, say, an awards show,
Oh,
or
yeah.
maybe you click on a press junket interview for a big summer blockbuster. For the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, there has been this subconscious bracing.
The cringe in advance.
Exactly. You're waiting for it. You're waiting for the lecture. You're waiting for that moment. The glamour just sort of drops. Finger wagging begins.
It became the industry standard, didn't it? The red carpet wasn't just about fashion anymore. It was a platform.
A political platform.
And if you weren't using your platform to, save the world, or at least signal your virtue about the crisis of the week, you were almost seen as wasting space.
Yeah.
It was the era of the activist actor.
Right. And we all just kind of accepted that as the new normal. But we have a stack of materials in front of us today that suggests the wind isn't just changing direction. It's like practically blowing the house down.
I think that's a good way to put it.
We are looking at what seems to be a massive, maybe even coordinated pivot in Hollywood. The era of the lecture might actually...
Or at the very least, the studios have looked at the balance sheet and realized that the lecture is just plain bad for business.
It's always the money.
It's always the money. We're deep diving today into a really fascinating analysis from the folks over at Clownfish TV, specifically a breakdown they did of the recent Berlin Film Festival. And their thesis is, well, it's brutal but compelling. Hollywood has finally learned to shut up about politics.
The video is titled, Hollywood Finally Learns to STFU About Politics, which is, obviously a very provocative title.
It looked clickbaity, sure.
A little. But the mission for our deep dive today is to look past that and unpack the actual mechanism of this shift. Because what the source material describes happening at Berlin, it really doesn't seem like an accident.
No.
It wasn't a coincidence that 3 or 4 major stars all refused to engage in political discourse in the exact same week.
That's the key. This looks like a strategy. It looks intentional. We are seeing a collision between two very different economies.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on one side, you have what you could call the press economy. It runs on sound bites, on outrage, on headlines about fascism and democracy in peril. It needs conflict to survive.
It needs the click.
It needs the click. But then on the other side, you have the movie economy. And that economy is realizing that the audience is just exhausted, the box office is fragile, and that old mantra of silence is violence is actually alienating the very...
Okay, so let's set the stage a little. The source material focuses really heavily on this vibe shift at the Berlin Film Festival. Now, for those who don't follow the festival circuit closely, Berlin isn't, it's not like...
Not at all. It's got a very specific reputation.
It's not Cannes, which is all about glitz and glamour, or Sundance, which is about, indie discovery.
Right. Berlin is the serious one. Historically, it is absolutely the most political of the big 3 fests. It's where you go to make a statement.
You go there to premiere a documentary about geopolitical strife, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So if you are a journalist at Berlin, you are hunting. You are hunting for that one quote that connects the art to the political now. You're looking for the headline.
Which makes what happened this year so glaring. The source describes this palpable conflict. You have the media journalists who are essentially operating from the 2018 playbook.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They are aggressively pressing these actors for sound bites. They're specifically asking about fascism in Europe, fascism in America, trying to get these stars to give them the headline that's going to drive traffic for the next 24 hours.
And on the other side, you have the talent, the actors, the filmmakers, and instead of taking the bait, which, let's be honest, they would have done happily 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, they would have jumped at the chance.
They're stonewalling. They're pivoting. They're deflecting. The source highlights this dynamic where the smart actors, and maybe more importantly their publicists, are actively walking it back.
So it's a PR pivot. But why now? I mean, is it just that they're bored of it? Or is it something...
I think it's much deeper than boredom. The source suggests it's a survival instinct.
A survival.
Yeah. Think about the economic climate. Inflation is high. People have less disposable income. When you ask someone to spend $20 on a movie ticket, plus another 20 on popcorn and a soda, you are asking for a significant investment.
You're asking for their date night, their one night out for the week.
Precisely. And the analysis suggests that the industry has finally realized the average person is tired. They are exhausted by the constant barrage of political messaging in their daily lives. They get it on the news, on social media.
It's inescapable.
It's inescapable. And so if the media needs conflict to sell ads, the actor needs unity to sell tickets. It's a fundamental conflict of interest.
So if you alienate half your potential audience in a press junket before the movie even comes out, that's a math problem the studio just can't afford anymore.
Exactly. It's a fiduciary issue now. It's a bottom line problem.
Let's get into the specific examples because this is where the theory really becomes concrete. The first patient zero for this shift that the source highlights is Bella Ramsey.
Right.
Now, Bella is very much in the zeitgeist star of The Last of Us, a show that is, decidedly dark, gritty, apocalyptic.
So you have a young star known for a very dark show sitting on a panel at a very serious fest. The press Season opening, they smell blood in the water.
They think this is our chance.
Totally. And the source details this interaction where a journalist asks a very pointed, very, very heavy question. They didn't ask about the acting process or the cinematography.
Of course.
They asked, and I'm quoting here, how is art meant to be political, and how can movies help fight the rise of fashion?
Wow. I mean, let's just pause on that. That is a loaded gun of a question.
It is.
Here's a microphone. Please solve the geopolitical crisis of the Western world in a 30-second soundbite. Go.
It's a complete trap. It's designed to be a trap. If you answer it earnestly, you risk sounding pretentious or, worse, naive. You risk alienating people who disagree with your very definition of what fascism is.
And if you ignore it, in the old playbook, you'd be accused of privilege or apathy.
Right. Silence is violence. But look at the response here. This is what's so different. The filmmaker on the panel, specifically the director working with Ramsey on her new project, stepped in with a complete reframe.
And what did they say?
The source quotes them saying, I think sometimes the most rebellious thing you can do is be optimistic.
Optimism as rebellion. I absolutely love that phrase.
Isn't that brilliant?
It completely flips the entire narrative on its head.
It's genius because it implies that the establishment narrative right now is doomed. The status quo is misery. If you open your phone, the algorithm feeds you crisis, the news feeds you crisis, social media feeds you outrage.
So if the default setting is then joy counter.
Joy becomes the punk rock move. The filmmaker then went on to say they wanted to make a film about taking you somewhere else.
In the source's analysis on this, they argue that this is exactly what audiences are asking. They want escapism, not more lectures.
It's what you could call the depressive realism problem. When the real world is going relatively well, people sometimes like gritty, realistic, political art to feel grounded. It feels important.
But when the real world feels chaotic and expensive and frankly a little scary.
The source argues that people pay for the exit door. They want 2 hours where fascism and their taxes and the potholes on their street just don't exist. They want a vacation for their brain.
So in a landscape that is just dominated by heavy political messaging, making a movie that is just fun or joyful is actually the radical act.
Disruption through happiness. It's a total return to the ethos of, say, the 1930s screwball comedy. The Great Depression was happening, the world was falling apart, so Hollywood made people laugh.
It was a service.
It was. And the source argues that the media, who often live in a bubble of constant importance, they just don't understand that the customer, the average person, is begging for a break. They're not asking for a civics lesson, they're asking for a good time.
This leads us perfectly to the next example from the source, which I think is even more explicit about the mechanism of this divide.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris. He was also at the festival promoting a project.
And Neil Patrick Harris, a veteran. I mean, he's been in the industry since he was a kid. He knows how the game is played. So his comments were incredibly revealing about the structural problem in not just Hollywood, but our whole culture.
He dropped this quote that the source really latched onto. He said, "We live in a strangely algorithmic and divided world."
The algorithmic part is key.
And he said because of that, as an artist, he's interested in doing things that are apolitical because at our core, humans just want to connect.
That word algorithmic is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. We really need to unpack that.
Yeah, what do you think he means by an algorithmic world?
I think he's talking about the business model of modern engagement. Social media algorithms, news algorithms, they are literally designed to segregate us.
To put us in boxes.
Exactly. They identify what makes you angry and they feed you more of it. They identify who you disagree with and they highlight their worst, most extreme takes to keep you engaged. It's called rage farming. It's a business.
So the algorithm's job is to push us into our corner, to convince us that the person living across the street is not just someone with a different opinion, but an enemy.
Precisely. And the source argues that for the last decade, Hollywood played right into that. They made content that was explicitly for one side and against the other. They were part of the algorithm. But what Harris is saying is, I'm stepping out of the algorithm. He's identifying that the real hunger in the audience isn't for more division, it's for connection. The source makes this really sharp point that even when people try to create something unifying, the activists get angry that it isn't political enough.
The source brings up a really concrete example of this. It's the movie Twisters.
A sequel, yeah.
So the source notes that there was this huge backlash from critics and certain online voices because the movie didn't focus on global warming.
Which seems like the obvious angle, right? Tornadoes, climate change.
It's the angle a 2020 movie, but this one didn't. It was a movie about tornadoes. It had wind, it had cows flying through the air, it had big trucks, but it didn't stop the action to give a lecture on climate. And the critics were furious.
But the audience.
The audience showed up in droves. It was a massive financial success. And the source argues that it succeeded because it just let people enjoy the spectacle without giving them homework.
That connects directly back to what the source calls the theater experience. And this is a really evocative point that I think it gets lost in all the Twitter
Yeah, describe that.
Okay, picture yourself sitting in a movie theater. It's dark. The previews are starting. You are shoulder to shoulder with complete strangers.
You don't know anything about them? You don't know their politics?
You'd have no idea if they voted red or blue or didn't vote at all. You don't know their stance on tax codes or foreign policy.
Yeah.
But when the first big joke lands, everyone laughs together.
Or when the jump scare happens, everyone jumps together.
Exactly. The source frames this shared emotional experience as the ultimate goal of entertainment. It's a temporary pre-political space, a little bubble of community.
And politics disrupts that. It pops the bubble.
Instantly. If the lead actor stops the movie to deliver a partisan line, the lights metaphorically come up, the spell is broken.
Yeah.
You suddenly look at your neighbor and you think, wait, is he one of them? You've turned a communal experience into a segregated one.
So Neil Patrick Harris seems to be saying, let's get back to the laughing together part. Let's protect that space.
Protect the sanctity of that shared experience. But it's also about knowing your audience. And more importantly, knowing who isn't your audience. Which brings us to Michelle Yeoh.
This interaction was, honestly, it was a bit painful to watch from a journalist perspective.
It was a masterclass in the bubble.
Yeah.
The media bubble.
So Michelle Yeoh is at the Berlin Film Festival. She's an international superstar, an Oscar winner. She is, for all intents and purposes,
untouchable.
And a reporter asks her how the current state of the U.S., and they specifically mention Trump and ICE, which is immigration and customs, how that impacts her.
And the source is just scathing about this. Because just stop and think about the arrogance of that question for a second.
It's incredible.
You are at a German film festival. You are talking to a Malaysian actress
who lives primarily in Switzerland.
Right. And you are demanding she comment on American domestic border policy, as if that's the most important thing happening in the entire world.
And yeah, just sidesteps it beautifully. She basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't think I am in the position to really talk about the political situation.
She just lays out the facts. She's not American. She doesn't live there. But the reporter just assumed she must have an opinion and that her opinion must matter, because she works in Hollywood.
The source really critiques this America-centric worldview. It's this deep-seated idea that my country's problems are the world's problems, and you, as a global celebrity, must validate my anxiety about them.
It is a bit narcissistic, because enough about your art, your film, your craft. Tell me about my election.
It's deeply provincial, and from a pure business perspective, Yeoh's response is the only smart move she...
Absolutely.
We forget this all the time, but for a major blockbuster, the U.S. box office is often the minority of the total revenue.
It can be as low as 35 or 40%. The rest is global.
So why in the world would Michelle Yeoh alienate her massive audiences in Asia, in Europe, in South America by getting bogged down in a Twitter fight about American politics? It makes no sense.
She's protecting her global brand. She says she wants to concentrate on what's important for us, which is cinema.
It's the ultimate stay in your lane, but in the best, most professional way possible.
It's a professional boundary. She's saying, I'm an expert in acting and filmmaking, not U.S. immigration policy. And the source praises this as a return to, well, professionalism.
Now, the source material takes a bit of a turn here. It moves from these specific news items from the festival into a broader, more philosophical critique. The commentator identifies as Gen X, and you can feel this real sense of nostalgia driving their argument, but it's not just, oh, I miss the 80s. It's a nostalgia for privacy.
That's a great way to put it. It's a nostalgia for ambiguity.
Yeah. The source recalls this good old days scenario where you just didn't know who your friends or your neighbors or famous actors voted for, and they frame this not as ignorance, but as a kind of social glue.
That's a key sociological insight right there. If I don't know your politics, I have to judge you based on your immediate behavior. Are you a good neighbor? Are you kind? Are you funny? Do you hold the door open for people? Your character. But once I know your politics, in today's climate, that filter changes everything. I start judging you based on your tribe, not your action. The source argues that this ambiguity, this not knowing, it actually allowed people to get along better.
The source uses a school analogy that I found really striking. They mention that teachers, back in the day, used to present both sides of an argument without ever revealing their own personal stance.
Which is the classic pedagogical ideal, right? You teach a student how to think, not what to think.
Exactly.
Because the moment a student knows the teacher is a diehard partisan for one side, they stop engaging in critical thinking, and they just start performing for the grade. They just tell the teacher what they want to hear.
And the source feels that has been lost that we've replaced education and, by extension, entertainment with this constant demand for a declaration of allegiance? You have to pick a
And show your work.
Now, we have to touch on the inclusion argument the source makes, because this is where that Gen X view really clashes with modern trends, and we need to parse this really carefully.
It's a very controversial point.
It is. The source has a pretty pointed take on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right. And to be clear about the source's point, we have to look at the mechanism they are criticizing. The claim isn't that diversity itself is bad.
No, they're very clear.
The claim is that inclusion already existed naturally in the past, but by forcing it, or as the source puts it, shoving it down throat, Hollywood has actually created bigotry where it didn't exist before.
That's a heavy claim.
Yeah.
They are basically saying the supposed cure is causing the...
It is. The argument is about organic versus performative inclusion. The source suggests that when you see a diverse cast in an older movie or in a show where it just feels natural to the story, nobody cares. They just watch the movie.
You just accept the world of this.
Right. But when a studio puts out a press release patting themselves on the back for how diverse and inclusive their new cast is, or when the entire marketing campaign creates a message around the casting, the audience gets their backs up.
It's the difference between being invited to a dinner party and being forced to listen to a lecture about the nutritional value of every single ingredient while you eat.
That's a perfect analogy. The source argues that the audience is reacting to the lecture, not to the people on screen. They are tired of the meta-commentary. They just want the story.
Speaking of representation, the source goes into a deep dive on Asian representation. This was prompted by those questions directed at Michelle Yeoh and also some comments by actor Simu Liu about representation gaps in Hollywood.
Right, and the source basically challenges the entire premise of the narrative that there isn't enough Asian representation in media.
And their evidence isn't Hollywood, it's the global market.
This is a crucial distinction that they argue Hollywood consistently missed. The source points to the absolutely massive popularity of imported content from Asia.
K-pop, anime, K-dramas on Netflix, C-dramas, Filipino drama.
I mean, just look at the number. Anime is a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. You have kids in rural Ohio who are obsessed with One Piece or Jujutsu Kaisen. You have K-pop groups selling out SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles.
It's mainstream culture now.
Completely. And the source analyzes this distinction between Asian American representation in Hollywood versus global Asian representation consumed by Americans. The argument is, if American audiences want stories with Asian protagonists, they're already watching them. They're watching them in droves by the millions.
So the source is essentially saying that Hollywood is running around trying to solve a problem that the consumer has already solved for themselves.
Yes, the critique is that Hollywood executives are wringing their hands saying, how do we get more Asian faces on screen? While the American teenager is at home binge-watching a 16-episode Korean series on their laptop.
Which, the source suggests, makes Hollywood's specific brand of representation feel redundant or, even worse, performative.
Exactly. The import market proves that American audiences aren't rejecting Asian protagonists. They are just, perhaps, rejecting Hollywood's version of representation, which so often comes with that lecture we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to the driving force behind all of this, because we can talk about culture and art and feelings all day long. But usually in Hollywood, the buck stops. Well, at the buck.
The bottom line is undefeated.
It all comes down to money. The source brings up the go woke, go broke concept, which is a catchphrase we hear a lot online, but it goes a step further here, suggesting there is essentially a gag order in effect.
The theory is that studios are actively stepping in and telling their talent to zip it.
And the source points to a big name, Pedro Pascal.
Oh, interesting.
Now, everyone loves Pedro Pascal, right? He's the internet's daddy. But the source describes him as someone who, in the past, wouldn't shut up about politics. He was extremely vocal on Twitter.
I remember that, yeah.
And the source notes that he's been much, much quieter recently.
The speculation is that the studio intervened. And look at it from a pure risk management perspective. Pedro Pascal is the face of The Mandalorian for Disney and The Last of Us for HBO.
He is a walking, multi-billion-dollar asset.
He is a cornerstone of two massive franchises. If his tweets are alienating 30 or 40% of the potential customer base, that's a gigantic liability. The source basically speculates, I think they gagged him.
Not physically, obviously, but a very stern talking to from...
A conversation that starts with, we love your passion, Pedro, but we love our quarterly earnings more. Maybe post a picture of a puppy instead.
And then there's the other side of the coin, Rachel Zegler.
The Snow White controversy.
Right. The source mentions that she allegedly cost Disney $170 million due to the PR backlash surrounding her comments about the original Snow White film and the politics she brought into the remake.
And interestingly, the source expresses genuine surprise that she was given a new leading role in a comedy afterward. It shows the tension the studios are passing. On one hand, they want the talent. Zegler is incredibly talented. No one denies that. But on the other, They are absolutely terrified of a repeat PR disaster. They're finally realizing that the old adage, all press is good press, might not be true anymore when it comes to political polarization. Bad press can actually kill a movie before it even opens.
The source wraps this all up with a pretty harsh ultimatum for the industry. The core argument is audiences do not need actors to tell them what to think.
And the tone here gets very, very sharp. The source characterizes those actors who constantly lecture their audience as, and this is a direct quote, thoughtless, brainless morons.
So tell us how you really feel, right?
But there's a specific anecdote the source uses to justify this anger, and it's about the debate over voter ID. This is where the source gets personal.
Right, this was a specific point they made about a sense of elitism.
Yes. The commentator mentions the political argument often made by Hollywood celebrities that requiring a photo ID to vote is discriminatory. The implication being that minorities aren't capable of getting ID, that they don't know where the DMV is, or they can't afford internet to look it up, or they're just not resourceful enough.
And the source found that deeply offensive.
Deeply. The source, who identifies as a woman who lived in a very poor area, sees that as condescension masked as compassion.
She calls it idiocy.
Yes. She says, I was resourceful enough to get an ID. All my neighbors were. We know how to use the internet. The source uses this to illustrate the massive disconnect. You have these wealthy Hollywood elites standing on awards show stages saying, we need to protect these poor, helpless people, and the actual people they are talking about are at home listening and thinking, we are not stupid. We can get a driver's license. Stop talking down to us.
It just reinforces that idea of the bubble. The elites think they are helping, but the message being received by the intended audience is actually a profound.
And that disconnect is what the source argues is driving this entire pivot. You can't lecture an audience you don't understand. If you insult their intelligence or their resourcefulness, they will simply stop buying your tickets. It really is that simple.
So let's zoom out here. We've looked at the specific moments from the Berlin Festival. Bella Ramsey choosing optimism, Neil Patrick Harris choosing connection, Michelle Yeoh choosing professionalism.
We've looked at the financial pressures, the so-called gag orders.
It really is a comprehensive picture of what seems to be a massive correction happening at time.
Go correction.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener? We are potentially moving from an era of preach to an era of entertain.
The pattern is consistent across all the examples the source provides. It's a refusal to engage in the discourse. It's a strategic retreat from the front lines of the culture war.
So is this a permanent correction, or is it just a temporary ceasefire until the next election cycle?
I think the source would argue it's a necessary market correction. The pendulum swung very, very far toward activism over the last 10 years. Now, financial reality is pulling it back toward pure entertainment. The studios need the general audience back in seats.
They need the shared experience.
You need the joy that Bella Ramsey's director talked about. They need to sell tickets to everyone, not just the people who agree with them.
And for us as consumers, it might change what we expect. We could be heading back to a time where we know a lot less about the personal politics of the people we watch on screen.
Which, ironically, might actually let us enjoy the stories more. If I don't know that the actor playing the hero hates my political party, it's a lot easier for me to root for him to save the day. I can't suspend my disbelief.
It's a fascinating prospect, but here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the question I kind of want to leave you with today.
Okay.
The source argues that this apolitical stance is about joy and connect. And that sounds great. It sounds wonderful. But I have to play devil's advocate for just a second.
Go for it.
If Hollywood successfully strips politics out of entertainment just to save the bottom line, if they sanitize everything to avoid offending anyone on the left or the right, will the art itself lose its teeth?
That's the danger, isn't it? Great art is supposed to provoke. It's supposed to challenge you.
Exactly. So can joy truly be a rebellion, as the filmmaker said, or does it risk becoming just a sedative? Are we entering a new golden age of unity, or are we just entering a golden age of distraction?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. Is it rebellion, or is it just anesthesia to keep us quiet while the world burns around us?
Something to chew on next time you're sitting in that dark theater, laughing along with a complete stranger. Thanks for deep diving with us. We'll see you next time.